everybody. Well, I've noticed that the hashtag stay at home is picking up a lot of traction, which makes sense because all of us around the world are in various stages of staying at home, probably more than we ever have in our lifetimes, including from birth until now. Whatever your age is, I bet you've never stayed at home as much as you have lately, unless you happen to be trapped overseas somewhere in a quarantine zone where you're in a hotel rather than at home. But in any case, we find ourselves very isolated and wondering what to do with all of our time, spending way too much time watching the news, burning through every imaginable episode on Netflix, Amazon Video, and just about everything else you could watch. I'm personally running out of shows, running out of movies, and definitely running out of patience to continue to watch the news. So I'd like to talk to you about just some major issues that have come up recently. One of those issues involves Hong Kong and the changes with the passage of the security law by China, which is imposed upon Hong Kong. And this is something that is interesting in that I believe it affects not just Hong Kong, but it affects you wherever you are in the world. What's interesting is that in a recent article that was just put out a couple days ago here, WhatsApp and Telegram will not hand over user data to Hong Kong authorities. And this is on 9to5Mac. It's also reported in various other places, such as The Guardian, and it's all over the news. Facebook and WhatsApp pause Hong Kong user data requests. That's as reported by theguardian.com. So here's what's interesting. So they're essentially saying that it's being paused, that they will no longer grant user data in Hong Kong, which, reading between the lines, which is not very hard to do in these stories, that means that they have been releasing this data to authorities all along until now, and only now has it been paused. So thank you to Telegram and thank you to WhatsApp, aka Facebook, for pausing the release of our private communications to government authorities in Hong Kong. The question I'd like to ask to Telegram and WhatsApp, Facebook, etc., and everyone else out there in the communication platforms that we assume to be private, such as Viber, if it has just been paused in Hong Kong, that means prior to this, you've been providing our user data to authorities upon request for all of time since your platform began, I assume, or at some point in the past that began. So around the world, it's good for everyone to realize your communications that you may feel are private because they're end-to-end encrypted, etc. Did anyone really realize that WhatsApp is granting your private conversations, your private interactions to authorities around the world upon request, and only now in Hong Kong has it been paused, but previously it was provided? Depending on your country, depending on privacy laws, and whatever agreements are in place would determine if that information is released. But the fact that it seems to be very routine concerns me a bit because so many people just assume their conversations are private. And I am not talking to a world of people with things to hide, although obviously some people do. But overall, I would say the average viewer of this episode is a law-abiding citizen for the most part and is busy in their lives and working hard and trying to do the right thing, and assuming that they can talk privately with their friends and their family and not have to worry about eavesdroppers listening in, viewing videos and pictures and conversations, etc. And the problem is laws in every country are different. So when WhatsApp's operating in a specific country, they are subject to the laws of that particular country and the privacy rights, etc. in that country. Now, throughout the pandemic, a lot of privacy rights that I've observed have changed in ways that make privacy not what it used to be, honestly, such as with contact tracing making its way into smartphones. Now there's API that's embedded in our phones. If you've done recent updates or buy new phones, smartphones for the most part have contact tracing, which keeps track of where you've been, who you've been around, and it's obviously archived in the cloud so that health authorities can go back and contact trace where you've been. Now the challenge is, who is going to access that data? Is it limited to health authorities, which in some cases are federal health authorities, which in some cases report through various levels of cabinet and directly with top-level administration officials? Obviously, that information could be accessed by law enforcement as well. And the question is, if you're critical of your government, are you in a country where that will put you in jail? Some of you are, some of you aren't. But good to know that platforms such as Telegram and WhatsApp and others have been releasing our private information all along, it seems, and now they're pausing in Hong Kong, which is great, and that's commendable. But what about pausing it overall? It inevitably, unless there's truly probable cause, and probable cause and warrants in some countries are not needed. In other countries, they are needed. In America, for example, based on FISA regulations, FISA legislation, there's no web browsing and search history privacy whatsoever. That's fully accessible at all times, so I wouldn't assume anything's private. So in any case, I wanted to talk a little bit about that today. The other thing I want to talk about, which is quite interesting, I find, is fatality rates from the pandemic, from the coronavirus. And I'm just seeing some shocking trends, and I've talked about this for several months now. But what's interesting is the trends that I was talking about a few months ago that could have at that point just been a random fluke and some good luck have continued to the point where they're really not trends. It's reality, and it's pretty shocking. So when you think about the fact that in America, it seems that we're averaging around a 5% fatality rate when you look at the total number of positive cases and the total number of fatalities, the fatality rate is really quite high. It's around 5%. Now, what's interesting, and it's not good news, it's bad news, is globally, if you look at the global number of positive cases and the global number of fatalities, it's also around that 5% range, 5 to 6%, somewhere in that range overall as an average. So America's kind of right in that middle zone. Of course, America has more cases than anyone else and therefore more fatalities than anyone else. But you would expect in a country with vast financial and economic and scientific and medical resources such as America, that America would beat the odds and have a more favorable fatality rate than other countries that don't have quite the same level of means as does America. But that's just not the case. And I want to talk to you about Singapore. So, and this is according to Reuters. I'm looking at just a really nicely done chart that shows you everywhere. And when I screen through it, what really amazes me when I look at Singapore has 45,000 plus cases as of the time of this broadcast, which for a smaller sized country is actually a lot of cases. So Singapore, based on a population of 4 to 5 million people approximately, that is actually quite a high infection rate. However, when you look at their number of fatalities, if you were to take 5% of the cases, just as doing some rough math, 40,000 would be 2,000 fatalities that you would expect. So if Singapore had the same fatality rate as America and the global average with over 40,000 cases, you would expect to see over 2,000 fatalities. How many fatalities has Singapore experienced from the COVID-19 virus as of the time of this episode? I'll tell you the exact number. The exact number is 26. 26. If you run the percentage, and I am not a math scientist by any means, but just doing this live and impromptu, that's about 0.1%, which means that the coronavirus is roughly 50 to 60 times more deadly in America and more deadly on a global average than it is in Singapore. So where would you like to be right now if you're worried about the pandemic? Singapore would be the place to be. Now, Thailand has also done quite well in controlling the number of infections, extremely well. They have a very low number of infections for a large country, and the number of fatalities is also relatively low, but in fact, it's higher than Singapore. So overall, when you look at countries, so Thailand, 58 fatalities, 3,200 infections, they've done an incredible job on controlling the number of infections. Qatar has also done very well in terms of a low number of fatalities. And so it's just interesting when you analyze this, what's going on in America is the question. So Qatar, 102,000 infections. So if you were to run the percentages there, you would expect about 5,000 fatalities. Qatar has 142 fatalities, which is so much more favorable than the global average and the average in America. So when you look at healthcare and when you look at response to a global health emergency and a domestic health emergency, I think the data shows you which countries are most squared away, sophisticated, prepared, ready, well managed, well organized, and just cutting edge in terms of medical treatment technology and their approach to science and doing what makes sense. And certain countries stand out and certain others do not stand out. And as an American, I find myself just shocked at how poorly America has done, both in number of infections, which is just an outrageous number of infections, and also the fatality rate. So America, as of the time of this episode, well over 3 million cases, over 133,000 fatalities, just a huge number. Now, what's interesting in America, also, if you look at recoveries, America over 3,132,000 cases confirmed as of the time of this broadcast, 964,000 recoveries. So that's basically less than 1 out of 3 positive cases has recovered. Now let's just take a look real quick at Singapore. So when we look at Singapore, as of the time of this broadcast, we're going to see a much different number. 45,423 positive cases, 41,645 recoveries, which is almost everyone, the vast majority, without using a calculator, that's over 90%, I would say, of the positive cases have recovered. Whereas when you look at America, it's just so much different than that. It's around 30% plus have recovered. So in Singapore, a small population with really a large number of cases, with such a low fatality rate and also such a high number of recoveries, it's really amazing. Obviously, Singapore is doing something right. I talked to a good friend in Singapore, and he said in Singapore, people just aren't worried about it because they know if they catch it, they're going to be okay. They're just going to go get treated and be okay. Now, in the early stages of the pandemic, both Thailand and Singapore were very aggressively treating infections of the COVID-19 using a cocktail of essentially antiviral agents, similar to what are used in treating HIV infections, and approaching it in a creative, scientific manner with incredible experts, and doing so effectively. And so why can't that happen everywhere? And as an American, why can't that happen in America? So it seems quite ridiculous and frustrating. So in any case, moving on as far as topics go, what do we do locked down in our house? This is what we do. We think about the pandemic. We think about what are we going to watch next? What's coming out? What new series is going to be rolled out on Netflix that we can binge watch, or on Amazon Prime Video, for example? What new movies can we stream? For example, there's a Tom Hanks movie, Greyhound, that I believe was originally intended to be released in theaters, but of course, based on what's going on in the world, the New World Order, the new normal, it's now going to be rolled out instead, it looks like, on Apple TV Plus. So a lot of changes, but that's the type of thing that we're doing these days. I know that people are going on vacations, that's starting, and vacations in a new type of way, not so much on cruise ships and airplanes. There's a bit of people starting to fly, but more vacations driving places, renting RVs, for example, camping. Those are the new pathway to leisure time and getaway time and family vacation time. So everyone's really quite concerned with the virus, depending on where you live. If you're in Singapore, you're not really that worried about the virus. If you're in America, you're probably pretty worried about the virus, especially depending on what state you're in and where things stand at this point in time. So the whole stay at home, the one thing I just want to tell to all viewers and all subscribers and everyone that hears this episode during these challenging times is that there's a false sense of security, I believe, once everything reopens and you can go places and dine in at restaurants and go to malls and maybe even go to movie theaters and do the things that you're used to doing. We're so hungry for that we feel that because we're allowed to, it's safe to. And it's important to remember that we're personally completely responsible for our health and the health of those we love, our friends and family and our community. And the challenge is we're faced with a situation that, although now we can go to these places and we can do these things, I would say that it's more dangerous now than it's ever been before, because now you have everybody out and about touching things, breathing, doing things. And so during states of lockdown, you're spending more time at home. Now everybody's out, and the chance of infection and the rates of infection, depending on where you are in the world, this won't be the same for everybody, obviously. But in America, for example, it's so exciting to be able to go anywhere you want to do anything you want to do. But look at the raging infections that are taking place, and there's talk about infection rates going down. Or sorry, not infection rates going down. There's talk about fatality rates going down in America to help justify the fact that, well, there's a lot of testing. That's why there's so many cases, and there's some truth to that. Mass testing will result in mass cases. So that makes sense. However, on the flip side of it, you would expect to see hopefully a drop in fatality rates. And there's talk in the US about seeing a drop in fatality rates. But when I look at the drop in fatality rates, it seems almost insubstantial, at least from my perspective. It sure seems like it's still around 5% fatality rate. I think it used to be maybe 5.5%, maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 4.9%, but it's nowhere near 0.1% as you're seeing in Singapore, or the very low percent you're seeing in Qatar, for example. And so for whatever reason, there's a big increase in number of cases in the US, which is a lot, in great part due to a lot of testing, but the fatality rates are still there. And 4.9 or 5.4%, sure, that's better, that's great, there's some improvement, but it's not dramatic, and it's not enough to say this is no big deal. The flu in America kills far less than 1% of those infected, just fractional percentage. It's like 0.1%, for example, which in Singapore it seems like COVID-19 is just like the typical flu, whereas in America, COVID-19, 5%, or give or take a fraction, around a 5% fatality rate is a major problem. That's a deadly virus. So, and of course it's mutated to become more infectious, and there's talk that although it's mutated to become more infectious, there's no evidence that it's more deadly, but also there's no evidence that it's not more deadly. So bottom line, a lot of room for improvement. Now there's talk recently about the virus being infectious on an airborne basis, and various countries and entities around the world essentially pressuring the World Health Organization to kind of acknowledge that and confirm that the COVID-19 can be passed airborne. But it seems strange to me, because if I remember right, and I've talked to others that seem to remember as I do, so either we're all crazy, which is possible, I suppose, or in the beginning of this pandemic, weren't we already told that this was airborne? That it could be spread through air? Isn't that part of the reason we wear masks, so that when we breathe, we don't infect others? Of course, there could be projectile saliva that's infecting others, but I thought that we all already knew for months that this could be spread through air, that it would circulate around the air possibly for hours, and if somebody coughed or sneezed and those viral particles are floating around for a few hours, and you walk into that particle cloud with your mouth wide open and inhale, you might get infected. I thought we knew that, so I'm not sure where that controversy is coming from. But this is the type of thing we do during stay at home. And I just want to encourage everybody, if you can just be a bit more patient and stay home a bit more than you'd like to, and make just sacrifices for a bit longer than you hoped you'd have to, I would say just even a few more weeks, even another month of laying low and staying safe as we get closer to hopefully finding an effective treatment and even a cure, and closer to a vaccine. If you're going to catch this, the longer you wait to catch it, the better, because the closer you are to an effective treatment, possibly a vaccine. In any case, every day, the healthcare system is learning more and more about how to treat the novel coronavirus, obviously. Or if you're in Singapore, you don't have a lot to worry about. If you can go to Singapore, go live in Singapore, and you won't have to worry about the pandemic anymore. So that sure sounds nice right now. I'd love to be there. Of course, they're not letting people fly in now, but soon they will. Of course, I'm sure there'll be disclosures and testing and making sure you don't have it before you go there. They don't want to import a lot of cases, obviously, but they've controlled it extremely well despite a lot of infections, very low fatality rates. So what I would say is, even though it seems to be so encouraging to get out there and do everything, if you can just hold off a bit longer, let the first wave or the second wave or whatever wave you're in subside, unless you're in a country that it's totally controlled. If you're in a country where it's not, a couple weeks can go a very long way to being much, much safer, especially those with compromised immune systems, those that are more susceptible, that may be deemed higher risk. But we've kind of broken through that barrier. Now it's like younger people are getting infected a lot in America. There's just this new trend where it's sweeping the younger populations, and there certainly are fatalities as well. And so just because you're young and healthy and invincible doesn't mean this virus won't be what takes you out. So everyone, please be careful. And that's it for today's broadcast. I hope you're all enjoying spending more time at home, and I hope you have some episodes left to watch of whatever shows are coming out soon. I sure hope that Hollywood continues to work on releasing new shows. I've noticed one more trend I want to mention. It seems like the last 3 or 4 movies I've watched are based in houses, and it seems like that's part of the new normal. Instead of watching movies that involve amazing scenery around the world and flying places and just incredible backdrops in exotic places, now it seems like the new movies I'm watching, at least, they're based in houses, or they're in and around houses and a big mansion, and that's kind of the movie set, and the whole thing is right around the house. So it seems like we're a bit more limited, and I'm expecting to see more and more movies that are kind of less movement, less freedom of scenery, and kind of more isolated, just in one place, watching one thing for quite a while. So in any case, it's still nice to have something new to watch, and I hope Hollywood's able to get some more new material out to us ASAP, and not just Hollywood, but Bollywood and everyone else that's making movies. Please keep doing it. TV shows, we need them. We need them. We're stuck at home. We're working from home. We're staying at home. Whatever you can do to help entertain us a bit, please do it. And by the way, virtual fitness, find a way to work out at home, watch videos, YouTube, or whatever you find. But let's stay healthy. Let's eat healthy. And let's watch some shows and get through this. Take care. Thank you for joining this episode. Please take a moment to click subscribe, and also click the like if you've enjoyed this episode. Click the bell, choose all for notifications so that you know when we do have new broadcasts. Thank you again for joining. Stay safe. Wish you all the best. Goodbye.